Castration controversy. New tonight on Our News, live at 7. The National Security Minister weighs in on a fellow cabinet minister's comments reported in a local daily today. Find out the minister's stance on the matter. But first, details of a $160 million project that's been approved in the Prime Minister's constituency. Also, the press secretary in the news tonight addressing concerns about a multi-million-dollar obligation being fulfilled by developers of the Nassau cruise port. And then in our news at 7:30, jury impaneled. The trial of a sitting MP embroiled in a corruption case gets underway. We've got the latest from today's court proceedings. Our news live at 7 starts right now. Welcome to Our News Live at 7. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Candino Knowles. Stunning comments about castration from a cabinet minister causing quite a bit of controversy. We've got those comments by Environment and Natural Resources Minister Von Miller reported in the Tribune today, as well as the stance the National Security Chief has taken in response. But before we get to that, we begin on Cat Island, where a pre-existing project that went dormant has now been approved. Joshua Williams was there this morning as the Prime Minister and area MP made the announcement.
Prime Minister Philip Davis announcing the approval of a proposed $160.45 million project by Cat Island Partners for a mixed-use golf course resort, residential and marina project at the PGA Village in Cat Island. The Prime Minister introduced the first phase of the project, which has now been proposed on a smaller scale.
Phase 1 of the project is earmarked to provide 150 behavior jobs during the construction phase and the 150 to 200 behavior jobs during the operational phase. Phase 1 is slated to include the construction of 125 single-family residential lots, 11.6 acres of multi-family residential pallets, 6 by 9 holes of the original Rees-Jones golf design, and an additional 9 to be added in Phase 2.
The project, which originally broke ground in 2009, encountered some issues in the years after.
The developers at the time encountered delays due to a number of factors, including that the courthouse site identified it for its proposed marina lacked available crown land nearby to make the site viable.
The announcement came during the 3rd annual Cat Island Business Outlook that was held on the island. The Prime Minister also sharing that the island has seen tremendous growth in GDP as a result of projects like this. He believes even more growth is possible.
Economic activity for the islands grew by 2% between 2020 and 2021. In 2019, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, some $88.6 million in economic activity was recorded. This level of activity can be achieved again. There is potential for even greater economic gains through expansion of existing and new industries.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Joshua Williams.
All right, thanks a lot, Joshua. Meanwhile, Press Secretary Clint Watson says the developers of Nassau Cruise Port have a year after its opening to invest $8 million back into the beautification of downtown. This after State Minister for Legal Affairs Jomo Campbell questioned in Parliament if the obligation was fulfilled. Here's Watson explaining in today's press briefing.
That $8 million is a part of the agreement for the cruise port. Part of the agreement is that once the cruise port is open, they have a year to fulfill the obligation. So they have 1 year once they open officially to fulfill the obligation of the $8 million. And the purpose of the $8 million will be to inject into small businesses in the area, particularly to help with their growth.
Speaking in Parliament Wednesday, Campbell expressed concern that the opening of Nassau Cruise Port could lead to a slow and painful death for some tourist attractions in the area. The cruise port is slated to open next week at a cost of some $200 million. Asked to respond to concern that the cruise port will hurt businesses, Watson says it's expected those buildings will be boosted.
Speaking to the Deputy Prime Minister, who's the Minister of Tourism, Chester Cooper, he's actually very excited about the possibilities for the business in downtown area. It's going to be a larger revitalization that's taking place that the ministry is doing with the Downtown Partnership and Board. You're going to see a revitalization of downtown. So we believe that businesses in the downtown area will see revitalization because the entire area will be a part of that.
All right, the Court of Appeal has overturned an award of damages granted to a former employee of Bradford Grand Bahama who was fired after he took an unauthorized leave of absence. Bradley Lord was awarded more than $14,000 compensation for unfair dismissal by the Industrial Tribunal, plus interest at a rate of 6% per annum. The Court of Appeal, however, reversed the tribunal's findings after ruling that Lord's dismissal was, in fact, justified. At the time Lord took off from work, he requested an additional 3 months unpaid leave just as his vacation was coming to an end. When asked to give a reason for the request, he simply said he was dealing with a private family matter. But when asked to give more specifics, he refused to do so. He was told that his request for leave was refused and that he had to return to work, but also refused. As a result, his bosses determined he had voluntarily terminated his contract of employment for the refusal. If you want to read more on this, head over to ournews.bs. And now to National Security Minister Wayne Munro, who is responding to a fellow cabinet colleague's call for people convicted of rape to be castrated or executed. Environment and Natural Resources Minister Vaughn Miller's comments were quoted in the Tribune newspaper and comes after a recent uptick of reported sexual assault and rape in the country. Munro had this to say.
There was a Privy Council case that addressed corporal punishment, and in fact it held that by a majority that corporal punishment was only possible for offenses that corporal punishment was possible for before the law was repealed. So we've never had a castration law, so I sincerely doubt that if you were to pass one, it would survive muster. But if people want to feel good to say you passed it and then it was struck down by the courts, that would be a view.
The National Security Minister says he understands that Miller is frustrated, and he says he has the right to express that.
I understand that Minister Miller was expressing his frustration at the level of certain types of crime, and as I say, sexual offenses. You have to be mentally disordered because there are too many people willing to willingly engage in relationships for you to have to resort to raping anyone. So he expressed his frustration, and he expressed it in the way that he said what he would like to see, and that's his right.
All right, we've got much more to get to tonight, including from Grand Bahama and across the world. But for now, it's time for your first look at temperatures. Meteorologist Greg Thompson, he's in the Weather Center with your first look at temperatures. Greg?
Yeah, thanks, Candino, and a happy Thursday evening, everybody. A very warm day around the islands. We actually had a few isolated showers earlier today across the islands. 82 degrees is our temperature right now outside our studios with a few clouds. It is warm. The winds are out of the south-southeast, bringing in that warm air mass at 9 miles per hour. And your feels-like temperature is at 81. Temperatures around the islands right now tonight, it's 82s in Freeport and in Marsh Harbor, Abaco. We pick up 84 in Alistown, Bimini. In Great Abiquiu, 83, 81 in Nicholstown, another 82 popping up in Governor's Harbor. Into the Central Bahamas, we are in the low 80s there as well, with a couple isolated showers across Kemps Bay and 81 degrees there. 82 in Arthurstown, Cat Island, and in Georgetown and Deadman's Key. Coburn Town, San Salvador, 80, and in the Southeast Bahamas. 83s in Duncantown, Ragged Island, Delectable Bay. More 82s popping up in Colonel Hill, Cricket Island, Abrahams Bay. Providenciales, you are 83, and Matthew Town, Inagua, you are the warm spot, a warm 85 degrees. Satellite view, a little bit of moisture across the Southeast Bahamas, lingering over there, and some isolated showers and thunderstorms occurring in that area, but the heating of the day and that high pressure system continuing to dominate the remainder of the islands, and we had a couple isolated showers popping up across Andros. You notice some of that cloud mass moving across us. That's what gave us some of those isolated showers earlier today. Most of that will be dying off, and we should see some clearing skies later on tonight. That's your first look at weather. Stick with us. Look at your extended forecast still to come.
Still to come on our news, fighting for survival. Straw vendors in Port Lucaya Marketplace sharing the hardships of making a sale as cruise ship passenger traffic remains up and down. But first, senators debate a resolution on human rights that now makes way for the appointment of a parliamentary committee. And later, how China loans are reportedly pushing poor countries to the brink of collapse. The story when Our News returns.
From the experts that created the Kentucky Chicken Sandwich comes the crispy barbecue sandwich. bacon, cheddar cheese, crispy onions, and the most delicious Kentucky Fried Chicken. Get ready for a whole new level of flavor. KFC. It's finger-licking good.
Are you or a loved one under medical care? Do you need affordable medical supplies? Ports International is the largest home health care supplier. Medical supplies at the very best price. And you can even shop online. From hospital beds to wound care.
Do what you want to do. It's your thing. Do what you want to do. Oh, it's your thing. Do what you want to do.
Shareholders are very happy.
It's your thing. Do what you want to do.
Senators debating a resolution for the appointment of a parliamentary committee on human rights to assess and evaluate all matters related to the protection and enforcement of human rights in the country. The committee will report to Parliament every 6 months and make recommendations to guide the legislative process. Seconding the resolution was Progressive Liberal Party Senator Quinton Lightburn.
This committee will work toward making real progress on human rights issues. The real progress of this committee will be measured by the impact of Bahamian lives in the future. Our human rights framework will be informed by international best practices, but will also consider Bahamian beliefs without a doubt.
The committee will comprise of members of both houses of Parliament. Also supporting the resolution was Opposition Senator Darren Henfield.
I believe that the fact that this committee will hold public hearings to hear from our communities and society is very good. The last time I spoke in this place, I indicated that I thought it would be beneficial to the Bahamian public if legislators, lawmakers would be able to go and sit and explain and listen to them more before we come to this place and bring legislation. And so this committee will be empowered to meet from time to time and place to place and call for papers and for people.
Now to Grand Bahama, where straw vendors at the Port Lucaya Marketplace say they are still finding it hard to make sales as they continue to rely on cruise ship passengers who don't come by too often. In this report, Berthany McDermott tells us how vendors are fighting for their livelihoods.
After what straw vendors are describing as a downward spiral for years, one Grand Bahama vendor says they're fighting to get things back to the way it was. Port Lucaya Straw Market Vendors representative Lorenzo McKinsey says they feel Grand Bahama has been ignored, adding it's time to take the bull by the horn.
A system has to be set up in Grand Bahama when it comes to the transportation and the control of tourists, because tourists are like this. They follow wherever you tell them because they're in the international waters or international island. So they'll follow what you say. So we have to have a system wherein not just one area will get the business, but everyone will get a piece of the pie when cruise ship come in.
McKinsey says they're not making enough money to comfortably pay bills and invest in their business, and he's not alone.
Like today is no boat day, and as you could see if you zoom your cameras, not even the pigeons are flying, right? It's nothing. So we have to trust God.
It's like Monday, the boat came early and left early. That's how they come and gone. Most of the vendors didn't make nothing. I came here and zero. But I don't let that bother me.
It's been a very bit slow for us to, and only we just have business like when the boat people come in and, and when the hotel people come, we just have a little business of them, but not much,
Vendors say this past Monday, a cruise ship docked, bringing tourists to the marketplace. But as straw vendor Delarice Davis explains, those on board didn't seem interested in buying. Despite the grim outlook right now, vendors say they're trusting in God and are hopeful Grand Bahama will make a triumphant return.
It's going to pick up for the Grand Bahama, because if everybody have the faith, it would pick up for Grand Bahama. But when you lose faith, you lose everything.
So we have to trust God. And we pray that, God will send a raven to us.
Reporting from Grand Bahama for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
When Our News comes back from the break, we turn our spotlight to stories making headlines across the world as the Walt Disney Company has scrapped a plan to invest nearly $1 billion in a new corporate campus in Florida. This as a federal grand jury in Puerto Rico indicts 44 people accused in a $1.2 million pandemic relief scheme. And later learn about the coral gene bank that's been formed to fight an underwater pandemic called Coral COVID. The details in tonight's Sustainability First report when Our News returns.
Welcome to The Rewind, an Our News monthly podcast
where we discuss various different topics in the Bahamian society.
I'm your host, Jasmine Lundy.
I'm your co-host, Janae.
I don't like eggs enough.
I get the vibes.
Right, let's put that on a shirt.
Go by our last name.
Yeah.
This is The Rewind.
Whether you're battling a chronic condition or offsetting a new injury, Doctors Hospital's comprehensive rehab services offer the help you need now.
Go to doctors.
3 advanced facilities at Collins Avenue, Carmichael Road, and Cable Beach means your personalized plan for care is just a visit away. From physiotherapy to occupational therapy and speech and language pathology, our team approach is all about rebuilding together. For a full list of services, visit doctorshosp.com/rehabilitation. Doctors Hospital, trusted and best care now. Isn't your health worth it?
This is Our News. Welcome back. We turn our attention now to stories making headlines across the world. The Walt Disney Company has announced that it is scrapping a plan to invest nearly $1 billion to build a new corporate campus in Florida. The cancellation was announced in an internal email to employees, including some who had relocated to Florida ahead of the campus's opening on Thursday. The plan would have seen about 2,000 employees relocate to a Disney-owned town near Orlando. The reversal comes amid an escalating feud between the entertainment giant and the state's Republican-led government headed by Ron DeSantis. A dozen poor countries are facing economic instability and even collapse under the weight of hundreds of billions of dollars in foreign loans, much of which the Associated Press reports are from China, which has been described as the world's biggest and most unforgiving government lender. An AP analysis of a dozen countries most indebted to China, including Pakistan, Kenya, Zambia, and Mongolia, shows most were devoting more than a third of government revenue to paying off foreign debt. Experts predict that unless China begins to soften its stance on its loans to poor countries, there could be a wave of more defaults and political upheavals. Colombian President Gustavo Petro says there is no confirmation that 4 children who went missing after their plane crashed in the jungle more than 2 weeks ago have been rescued. Search teams have found items they say they think belong to the children in the jungle, as well as a makeshift shelter. This has led them to believe the children have been wandering alone through the rainforest since the crash. But Petro says information about their rescue could not be verified. The children, who range in ages 13 years to 11 months, were on board a small plane along with their mother, a pilot, and a co-pilot when it crashed on May 1st. Authorities say the adults all died. And from the region, a federal grand jury in Puerto Rico indicted 44 people accused in a $1.2 million scheme to illegally obtain pandemic relief funds. The suspects are accused of submitting at least 52 loan applications to obtain federal recovery funds that U.S. Attorney Stephen Muldrow said they used to support their own personal lifestyles, taking needed resources from those who legitimate business owners and were suffering from losses due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Authorities allege the suspects submitted applications using fake tax documents, payroll records, ID cards, and bank records. And finally, the Caribbean Examinations Council, CXC, has launched investigations on learning of a possible paper leak on Wednesday. In a press release issued, CXC indicated it is aware of the concerns that the Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate Math Paper 2, which was written already, was leaked. CXC said the matter is of great concern and that officials have commenced investigations. CXC did not indicate if the investigations are in specific markets at this time. All right, back here at home, where this morning, members of the Ministry of Agriculture Atlantis Resort, the Atlantis Blue Project Foundation, the Perry Institute for Marine Science, and the University of the Bahamas gathered to sign the agreement for the Bahamas Coral Gene Bank at Paradise Island. Marlena Leonard has more in this week's Sustainability First report.
Bahamas First, putting sustainability first for our people and our environment. What's first for you and the planet comes first for us.
Senior scientist at the Perry Institute for Marine Science, or PIMS, Krista D. Sherman, explained the need for what will be the first coral gene bank in the Bahamas. She also outlined the fight to protect and preserve coral against stony coral tissue loss disease.
It is highly infectious and spreads rapidly, killing most of the major reef-building coral species that we have in the Bahamas. Sadly, corals that took centuries to grow are being killed in a matter of weeks.
To date, PIMS has surveyed reefs for the disease over 1,000 square kilometers, spanning 10 islands in the country.
Coral reefs are also the most valuable ecosystem in the Bahamas, worth up to $1.35 million per square kilometer per year, totaling billions of dollars in ecosystem services annually. If we don't act immediately and with great urgency, this disease will have a major impact on revenues from fisheries, tourism, and put lives and property at a much greater risk from hurricanes, coastal erosion, and storm surge that are forecasted to increase in both severity and frequency due to climate change.
And PIMS is putting their money where their mouth is, investing over $100,000 in the design and planning of the Bahamas Coral Gene Bank, as well as hiring a team of Bahamian aquarists.
Today, we are proud to be instrumental in the creation of the first living coral gene bank for the Bahamas, an essential weapon in the fight against stony coral tissue loss disease.
Reporting for Our News and reminding you to put sustainability first, I'm Marlena Leonard.
Still to come in Our News, today in history, find out interesting facts about the day that was May 18th, including the 1981 closure of International Air Bahama Airlines. And then in Our News at 7:30, the Prime Minister dismissing questions about the cost of his recent trip to London. This as a jury has been impaneled in the Long Island MP corruption case. That's coming up when Our News continues. Welcome back to Our News. It's time now to turn our spotlight on events that shaped the day that was May 18th. Take a look. On this day in Bahamian history, in 1981, after operations commenced on July 20th, 1968, International Air Bahama Airlines ceased its operations. Founded as Air Bahama in 1966 by Major Norman Ricketts, Brigadier General O.D. Lassiter, and Mr. Tommy Thompson. Airways magazine notes the trio decided to set up an airline after then Prime Minister Lyndon Pindling moved to further develop the country's tourism industry. Scheduled flights were offered from Nassau to Luxembourg, which offered a useful and affordable entry point for United States military personnel's families stationed in neighboring Germany. Then in 1997, the Bahamas government severed diplomatic relations with Taiwan. The Associated Press reporting at the time that Taiwan's decision followed the Bahamas' decision to establish ties with rival China. Bahamas Foreign Affairs Minister at the time, Janet Bostwick, said in a statement, the decision to switch diplomatic links with China was made after careful and deliberate consideration. May 18, 2012, the U.S. State Department issued a report on the Bahamas' crime problem and increased its threat level of crime from high to critical, particularly over crimes against tourists. Government expressed disappointment over the report, with then National Security Minister Dr. Bernard Nottage saying at the time that government would implement a dynamic approach to stem the problem it inherited. The report highlighted a 35% increase in murders in just 1 year and said common daily activities could directly impact personal security.
We are concerned, whether it's broadcast around the world or not, we are the victims of it, and it's being perpetrated upon us by members of our own communities. So we have an obligation to seek to counteract it in the quickest time possible and most as effectively as possible. So the fact that it has reached elsewhere in the world is just a consequence. But we are victims, we are daily victims. I know that people of our communities are living in fear of crime, and so people like to put the emphasis on what happens to tourists when they come here, but there are a whole lot of things that happen to our own citizens.
May 18, 2015 saw the commemoration of the Battle of Nassau at Fort Montague. In 2021, Atlantis, the country's largest private sector employer, laid off 700 employees. It was the second wave of layoffs since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020.
The government wishes to empathize with all 700 of those families, of those employees, and to say that we're doing everything in our power to ease the burden and to bring assistance.
And finally, on this day in 2022, stakeholders at Lyndon Pindling International Airport conducted a full-scale emergency exercise. This as local and international aviation regulation requirements made airports establish an emergency plan commensurate with the aircraft operations and other activities conducted at the airport. To watch that historical recap again and for all of today's top stories, you can visit ournews.bs. It's going to do it for us in News at 7. Joining us now is Italia Hall with the latest headlines. Italia?
Yes, Ken, happy Thursday. We're almost at the end of the work
one
week.
more day.
One more day, and I can say TGIF.
Yes,
all right,
same.
Thanks so much, Ken. Well, the trial of an MP facing corruption charges about to get underway, and the Prime Minister on the defense over his recent travel to London. Here are your latest headlines.
Allegations denied. First tonight on Our News Live at 7:30. Following intimidation claims by employees of the Atlantis resort, a senior executive is hitting back. But first, jurors selected today for the trial of Long Island Member of Parliament Adrian Gibson, as he and 5 others face corruption charges. Plus, taking flights. The nation's leader tight-lipped following strong criticism from the opposition about his recent trip to London. And later, it doesn't fit our aesthetics. That comment coming from a top Atlantis executive, as a new Wendy's restaurant is expected to be constructed on Paradise Island. Our News Live at 7:30 is back in a moment.
Welcome to The Rewind, an Our News monthly podcast
where we discuss various different topics in the Bahamian society.
I'm your host, Jasmine Lundy.
I'm your co-host, Janae.
I don't like eggs enough.
I get the vibes.
Hey, let's put that on a shirt.
Go by our last name.
Yeah.
This is
The Rewind.
Welcome to our news and thank you for joining us. I'm Natalia Hall. One Atlantis executive is shooting down claims. And in other news, a Supreme Court jury was in panel this afternoon in the trial of opposition Long Island MP Adrian Gibson, who was indicted last year on corruption charges. Gibson is accused of getting $1.1 million in kickbacks from contracts awarded by the Water and Sewerage Corporation, while he served as its executive chairman under the Free National Movement Administration. Gibson is charged along with his campaign general, Joan Knowles, Elwood Donaldson, the corporation's former general manager, Jerome Mizik, Peaches Farquharson, and his cousin, Rashay Gibson. The jury of 5 men and 4 women is expected to begin hearing testimony in the case on Tuesday. Police on the island of Exuma are investigating a shocking crime. According to reports, around 12:15 a.m. on Thursday, 3 men broke into a vacation home in Georgetown and robbed 2 visitors. Police say the man and woman were asleep when they were awoken by 3 masked gunmen wearing dark clothing. The man reportedly blindfolded the victims, drove them to a nearby ATM machine, and forced them to withdraw cash. Police say the victims were not hurt during the crime. Officers from the Criminal Investigation Department in New Providence will travel to Exuma. The Minister of National Security, Wayne Monroe, revealing the government's 4-point strategy to address crime, while also calling for public involvement. Megan Shepard reports.
Crime is sin. The Bible tells us that we will always have sin.
The National Security Minister accepting that crime will always be a part of society. And while it may never be eradicated, he says it could be addressed and mitigated. The minister outlining the government's plan to address the issue.
That is firstly, prevention. Secondly, if you are unsuccessful in preventing the person from criminal behavior, then you have to detect, interdict, and arrest that person. The third step along the way, having detected, arrested, and interdicting them, is you have to subject them to the criminal justice system as swiftly as possible.
And the fourth stage, if they are sentenced,
99+% of them will leave the correctional facility. We have to convert our prison to truly a correctional facility, or else the persons who went up there in a particular way will come out none the better.
Monroe, who made the comments at this afternoon's Rotary Club of West Nassau meeting, explaining that in prison, recruitment can be quite easy for gangs as they offer young men protection or other incentives in prison. When it comes to rehabilitation, he says this is where the public partnership comes in.
You have to show these young men and women that we actually care about them. The government is seeking to do its part by putting in place a decent correctional facility that can meet standards of what a correctional facility should be. We're seeking to put in programs that address why you were committing crimes. We have to make sure that when you come out of the facility, you are better than when you went in.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Megan Shepard.
All right, thanks, Megan. Well, Prime Minister Philip Davis says he's not aware of any criticism related to his recent trip to London for the coronation of King Charles III. His comments came days after opposition leader Michael Pintard said the government must give a full accounting for the trip. When asked about the cost and to respond to critics, Davis said this.
I've seen no criticism, and I've not seen the criticisms, nor have I heard any questions about the delegation.
Okay. The delegation included Prime Minister Philip Davis and his wife, opposition leader Michael Pintard and his wife, Governor General C.A. Smith and his wife, Foreign Affairs Minister Fred Mitchell, and former Governor General Dame Marguerite Pinling. Individuals from the Office of the Prime Minister also made the trip, like Press Secretary Clint Watson, Communications Director Latrey Ramming, and Orange Economy Consultant Ian Poitier. Social media posts indicated others travel along with the delegation, although it's unclear who paid for their travels. The government has come under heavy fire for recent trips. Watson was asked for the cost of the trip at this week's press briefing.
I've made a request for that, and so I'm waiting for them to send that information to me because it is a question people are asking. And so we're going to hopefully get that information, those figures, and I'll present those to you once we get them.
Last week, Minister of Labor and Immigration Keith Bell revealed the Department of Labor had received complaints from Atlantis employees who say they felt pressured by their employers to take a position on the proposed RCI Beach Club on Paradise Island. Tonight, Atlantis is responding. Marlena Leonard has more in this report.
We're concerned, not so much from what the survey will say, if anything. We're just concerned with the approach. We view ourselves as an important corporate citizen in the Bahamas. We're the largest private sector entity here. And we've had a very good relationship with the Department of Labor and certainly the Bahamas government over the many years of our development and operation. And this was just a bit of a surprise for us.
That's Vaughn Roberts, Atlantis' Senior Vice President of Government Affairs and Special Projects, responding to questions about the investigation by the Department of Labor on whether or not Atlantis pressured and intimidated employees to take a particular course of action when it comes to RCI's proposed beach club project on Western Paradise Island. He says the communication they made to staff was simply to explain why Atlantis had spoken publicly about their position.
We stand firm in our view that our employees can make the right decisions, good decisions of their own. And we were basically just sharing information around why we stood out as Atlantis with respect to the environmental concerns.
Last week, the Department of Labor went to the resort and handed out survey cards to the staff as part of the investigation. And while Roberts tells us Atlantis has been cooperative in the process, they're disheartened by the handling of the situation.
I don't imagine that they got a lot of participation, just because they handed out survey cards. They didn't reach all of our employees, and we saw the cards on the floor in the parking area. So it's not clear to us yet how many responses they got. They apparently are tallying up and summarizing the findings, and so we look forward to seeing what the survey uncovered.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Marlena Leonard.
And Roberts also telling Our News Atlantis is opposing the opening of a Wendy's restaurant on Paradise Island. More on that coming up in about 5 minutes. But for now, some nice conditions this evening outside the Our News studios following some showers earlier today. Greg is in the Weather Center with a first look at weather. Greg?
Yeah, thanks, Natalia, and welcome everybody for a quick check on conditions outside the studios and around the islands. It's 82 degrees outside now. A few clouds. Well, we still have a few lingering showers. We had a couple of those earlier. It's warm. Temperatures out of the, winds actually out of the south-southeast at 9 miles per hour, and that is making it feel like 81 degrees on the outside. High pressure in charge of most of the island chain, with the exception of the southeast Bahamas. We still have some lingering showers down there with some moisture still in place. A couple isolated thunderstorms as well. Showers and thunderstorms popping up over Andres, moving across the area, but we are starting to see some clearing skies, and we continue to see some more showers and thunderstorms in the forecast tomorrow. That's your quick check on conditions around the island. Stick with us. A look at your extended forecast is still to come.
Still to come on Our News, a new Wendy's may soon be constructed on Paradise Island, but it's not without some pushback. Hear what a top Atlantis executive is saying about the fast food chain's plan. And following a tough 3 years due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it appears as if the economy of the Bahamas is on the rebound. Tonight, an executive at RF Bank and Trust fills us in. And why preparation is key. The 2023 Atlantic hurricane season is only a few days away, and NEMO officials are urging residents not to wait until the last minute to prepare. The details when Our News returns.
Are you or a loved one under medical care? Do you need
Senior Vice President of Government Affairs and Special Projects, Vaughn Roberts, confirming Atlantis has expressed opposition to the notion of a Wendy's restaurant being opened on Paradise Island. The proposed location is the building that once housed the old Scotiabank. Roberts says the conversation has been going on for over a year.
The old Scotiabank building was for sale. A local Bahamian family bought it, and with the intention of converting its use to fast food operations. We got word of it through the Department of Physical Planning. We participated in what seemed like a private discussion on it, and we voiced objections then.
And the Atlantis executive says the concern isn't over competition. Rather, it is a contradiction with the branding and vision of the island as a luxurious location.
We oppose it on the basis of, the potential to create traffic and congestion. We don't think it fits in with the ethos and the aesthetics of what we aspire for Paradise Island. We don't really see it as competition. Our food and beverage business is about $200 million a year, so a single fast food outlet is not really a threat to us.
Well, we're almost halfway through the year, and according to Vice President and Group Head of Investment Management at RF Bank and Trust, David Slatter, the country's economic outlook for the rest of the year looks positive. During our monthly sit-down, he told me the Bahamas benefited from the momentum that was generated in 2022 coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and as that, the tourism sector recovered strongly.
The question is what happens afterwards, and we think that based on research we've done, whether it's looking at reports from the central bank or on Bloomberg or through entities like Morgan Stanley, that you're going to see slowing economic growth in North America, and that'll feed into the Bahamian economic outlook as well. So more around 2% per annum next year, which is historically kind of a long-run growth trend. The bad word, inflation, we've been hearing a lot about that here in the Bahamas as well as, say, in North America. So inflation has been abnormally high and definitely much higher than, say, central banks would like it to be. Here in the Bahamas, we import inflation from the U.S. because our currency is linked to the U.S. dollar. And in the U.S., the central bank over there, the Federal Reserve, has been raising interest rates rapidly to try and slow down economic growth so inflation can get back to their long-run target of 2%. Those policies are feeding into our economy. So inflation is expected to remain a challenge for the balance of this year, and economic growth is slowing. So you still have inflationary pressures, slowing economic growth, and that's going to feed into 2024 as well. But we expect inflation to become less of a concern in 2024 for North America and the Bahamas as a whole.
Okay, any key positive developments for the Bahamian economy?
Yeah, I mean, so it's not all doom and gloom. And when I say slowing economic growth, I'm not talking about some kind of deep or prolonged recession. I'm simply saying expectations for economic growth should be around that 2% level. So if you're budgeting as an individual or budgeting as a company, that's what you should be thinking about.
All right. Now, during that interview, Slatter spoke more about those key positive developments for the Bahamian economy that you'll see more of during our news at 7:30 tomorrow.
It's now time for tonight's Financial Market Minute, brought to you by RF, your local investment bank. This has been your Financial Market Minute. To explore the best performing mutual funds in the Bahamas, visit our website at www.rfgroup.com.
When our news comes back from the break, have you begun preparing for the 2023 Atlantic hurricane season? Well, NEMO officials are encouraging residents to get prepared as the season begins on June 1st.
A Bahamian will be the first woman to referee in the CONCACAF Beach Soccer Pre-World Cup, and we take you to the first ever Bankers Athletic Association Golf Cup. Our sports is coming up next.
And light showers around some parts of the island today, and more rain is expected. Greg is back with your extended weather right after this quick break. Stay with us.
Oh, it's your
Today's sports update is sponsored by Michelob Ultra, distributed in the Bahamas by Jimmy's Wines and Spirits.
This is Our News. Welcome back. Meet the pioneering woman making history as a beach soccer official, and bankers show what they have on the golf course. Here's Tage Adderley with a check on sports. Tage?
Hello, Italia. Good evening. Welcome to Our Sports. I'm Tage Adderley. Anissa Aubrey was the only Bahamian officiate at CONCACAF last week. She's about to make another step in her international officiating career. Beach soccer referee Anissa Aubrey made history as the only woman and the only Bahamian official at the CONCACAF Beach Soccer Cup right here in New Providence. Now she's on course to make even more history, becoming the first woman and the first Bahamian to be selected to officiate in the CONCACAF pre-World Cup event. The World Cup is scheduled for November of this year in Dubai. The United States and Mexico will be the countries representing CONCACAF in the tournament. We'll have more on Aubrey's history-making international officiating career later on. I've worked with Denise in the past. She's given so much to the game, especially at the youth level. It's great to see people like her winning. Moving on to local sports, professionals in the financial industry showed off their skills at the first ever Bankers Athletics Association golf tournament over the weekend. Professionals from a number of financial institutions competed in the inaugural Bankers Athletics Association golf tournament this past Saturday at the Bailu Hills Golf Course. The competition format was 4-man scramble with 36 golfers in total competing. Global Sun Integration Management's team took home the trophy, and RBC won runner-up. Fran Adderley won closest to the hole winner for men, and Anish Karol won for women. The tournament also featured golfers from Fidelity Bank and First Caribbean. I haven't played golf since I was a kid. I want to get back into it. If you're looking for a terrible golf partner, reach out to me. That was your look at sports. I'm Tage Adderley.
Still ahead on Our News tonight, how prepared are you for the 2023 Atlantic hurricane season? Well, NEMO officials say now is the time to prepare as the season begins in less than 2 weeks. And cloudy skies and light rain around a few of the islands today. But what kind of conditions can we expect as the work week winds down? Greg is back with your extended forecast when Our News returns.
Are you looking for a miracle, breakthrough, or deliverance? Join a Pentecost parade this coming May 28, 2023, commencing at 2:30 p.m. from the Church of God of Prophecy, Street Tabernacle, and culminating at
Welcome back to our news. Officials from the National Emergency Management Agency and the Bahamas Met Department say lessons have been learned from Monster Storm Dorian. Acting Director for the Bahamas Department of Meteorology, Jeffrey Simmons.
It assists with, like I said earlier, it assists with evacuation. We know that if we're going to get a certain level in a certain area, that's not a good place to go. Information is passed on to disaster managers. You have storm shelters in these areas. It is not wise to open these storm shelters because we have seen in previous hurricanes where storm shelters actually became compromised because of this. So we will be able to say it's not a good idea to open that particular storm shelter. Maybe you should look at moving in another area, and even to extend maybe getting the moving persons from island to island. There'll be a place where you don't have to really leave the island. Just leave the northern part of the island and seek shelter down in the southern part of the island.
Waiting until the last minute to prepare for hurricanes remains a concern. Geographical Information Systems analyst for NEMA, Suzanne Russell Dorset, is encouraging them to take action now.
Start your planning not in June at the beginning of the hurricane season, but at the very best at the beginning of the year or off season. Start making preparations, saving, so that you can purchase the necessary gear that you need. Learn as far as getting your medication in time, maybe getting safety resources such as your life jackets, your rain boots, your gears. Make sure you secure your documents. We advise that you do that at the beginning of the year. Don't wait until the last minute to start your preparations for the hurricane season.
Preparations for the 2023 Atlantic hurricane season and weather. We saw some rain in the capital this afternoon, but what does that mean for the rest of the work week? Well, Greg is back in the Weather Center with their extended weather forecast. Greg?
Yeah, thanks again, Natalia, and welcome back, everybody, for our final check of weather. Ridge of high pressure is still across our area. It's dominating our weather and it's keeping up with a light pressure gradient. That's going to promote some light to general winds across the islands through tomorrow, as well as tonight. Those winds expected to fall off. Lingering moisture across the southeast Bahamas, generating some isolated showers and thunderstorms across there. But in the meantime, we're watching an upper level disturbance across the eastern Gulf of Mexico, expected to slide across Florida. Will generate some uptick in some shower and thunderstorm activity across the islands as it pushes across our area by tomorrow, and eventually should move out into the open Atlantic and leave us with high pressure once again in charge of our weather through the remainder of the weekend. Future forecast showing just a couple of isolated showers today. That shower chance will wane as the night goes on, then upper level disturbance moving across Florida, giving us some more showers and thunderstorms through Friday, and expected to linger some across Saturday before it pulls out of our area, and then our high pressure system takes charge. Boating conditions across all areas tonight to tomorrow. Those winds will be light and variable, but they become east to southeast at 10 to 15 knots tomorrow. They will also fall light and variable at times during that time frame. Seas running 2 to 4 feet over the ocean. Your high tide is at 8 p.m. tonight. Here's a look now at your national forecast. In your extended forecast, isolated showers in the forecast once again tomorrow. Then we get a period of some mostly to partly sunny skies through the early part of next week. And then by the middle of next week, we expect some more showers in the forecast as another disturbance moves in our area. That's a look at our weather. Make it a safe night, everybody.
All right. Thanks so much, Greg. And thank you for joining us for our news tonight. On behalf of the entire team, I'm Natalia Hall. We'll see you tomorrow night. Have a great evening. On the Record starts now.